I decided to write up a previously unplanned piece regarding the celebrated animated film from last year, the winner of the Best Animated Feature Oscar, the Latvian-French project known as Straum, or in English as Flow. I really must have been out of the loop. I never heard of this film until just the other week. I had neglected to look through the nominees for Best Animated Feature, otherwise, I might have taken some note of it. I still need to see Wallace and Gromit Vengeance Most Foul. I'd wanted to see that in the cinema, but regrettably did not get around to it, and I definitely want to check out that newer Adam Elliott feature also. I am completely astonished that Flow was a feature that cost the equivalent of 6 million Australian dollars. To you Americans, that's just under 4 million USD. To the Brits, just under 3 million pounds, as all they spent was 3.5 million euros. That currency you Brits stridently refused to convert to for like a 20 odd period there. Given that this film wound up grossing 36 million US dollars, they've raked in a killing, and its credited director, Gints Zilbalodis, his co-writer Mattis Kazar, and everyone at either Dreamwell Studio, Sacre Bleu Productions, and Take 5 ought to be thoroughly enriched from this, and they absolutely deserve to be, as this is certainly one of the finer animated features I've seen from this decade, from maybe 2010 on, or just, well, this 21st century at large. Flow is a reasonably simple premise, with a highly complicated, elaborate, animated, computer graphics employed execution. In a seemingly post-apocalyptic world with no humans, a series of animals attempt to survive an onslaught of inescapable flash floods. We follow this charming, resourceful cat, and his little odyssey is depicted via sweeping, awe-inducing camera movement, an unbelievable attention to detail and motion where the actual movement of these animals is concerned, and the realizing of that most difficult of tasks, animated water, an intensely tricky feat, but best realized here since perhaps 1940s Disney's Pinocchio, which also featured an iconic animated cat as well as a gargantuan whale. Or the highly impressive Chinese animated film of 2 years ago, 2023's Deep Sea from Tian Xiaopeng. As a feat of animation alone, Flow deserves to be cherished for all of time, although, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this, something so potentially saccharine and overly emotional, but the sheer enrapturing resonance that one feels for the depicted players might be the most immediately impressive aspect of the film. I happen to be very fond of cats in general. You may be able to see some of my older cats in some films I directed, which are uploaded to the Therapy Pictures channel. And the cat protagonist of this film is so viscerally believable in his motions, his behaviours, and his apparent well-meaning innocence that we find ourselves really rooting for them, not just because they are a cat, an animal with otherwise human anthropomorphized characteristics, as in the Disney films of many, many decades past, but because he is an animal who reminds us of the animals we might have known and bonded with in real life. It is almost the equivalent of watching an animal attempting to survive in some nature documentary and feeling emotionally invested in their challenges and adventures. The protagonist feline is joined in an almost Life of Pi manner by a brilliant capybara. That was a fantastic choice of animal, I feel. A treasure-seeking lemur, a secretary bird who acts as something of a Noah's Ark dove, one could potentially claim, and a pack of dogs, most notably an assertively friendly golden retriever. There is also an imposing whale, as I'd inferred earlier, and which may be in a roundabout way this film's further homage to 1940s Pinocchio, or it just expressing its inevitable debt to that monumental leviathan of a work in itself, be it consciously or just subconsciously, inherently. I was so impressed with the film, I was bowled over. What a magical undertaking. This is truly the kind of animated feature starring animals that kids ought to be watching instead. I can say with confidence that I would have adored this as a kid, and it sets an important precedent about film as a visual medium, not reliant on plots weaved with dumbing down, some of the time, dialogue, and just about emotion, motion, and the shared struggle of living organisms. It has me realizing that I don't spend really enough time with contemporary animated features, and whilst I tend to be behind on assessing contemporary films anyway, maybe I ought to at least keep track of the major animated features which are coming out in this day and age. I feel like one of the many sentimental, hopefully not too overbearingly performative, film fans who find themselves entirely moved by this animated project. I've been taken in, I'm enchanted, you ensnared me, I'm being dragged away by the bandwagon, and very happily so too. People would sometimes spend too much time waxing verbal about how beautiful and emotionally profound and self-important some of those Miyazaki films make you feel. Though those are spectacular, amazing films, some of them, the way people use them as a means to project their humanity, to make up for the fact that they consider certain other people or adolescents to be so lame and beneath them, it totally sickens me, really. Or one of those third-party European animated ventures generally, or even some of the Australian works, like by the aforementioned stop-motion champion Adam Elliott. I've known too many people who go on about how beautiful and enchanting these films are, but really they're just the nastiest fucking people who like to gossip over and mock people they considered beneath them. But then, as someone who grew up as an adolescent in the social media epoch, maybe my own perspective on adolescence is skewed to be extremely negative, as they were all bullying, insidious, sociopathic bastards, and as Bart Simpson once bitterly suggested about another generation, we could have used another Vietnam to thin out the ranks of the Millennials or Gen Zs a little. But what about you, you may be asking? How would you feel if you were drafted to go fire bullets at some Charlie in the dense jungle? I'd either dodge the draft, frag my commander, or join the Viet Cong. I know. Hey, you wouldn't like being drafted. You wouldn't really be able to dodge. You wouldn't like it among the Viet Cong, blah, 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 blah. As long as members of my generation are suffering or dying, I am perfectly okay with whatever has to also happen in my own life. Yep. Actually, if my generation globally has a saving grace, it is the existence of this film, Flow. The director, Gints Zilbalodis, is 31 years old. They've made a profit from Flow, and hopefully they use it in an extremely imaginative way going forward. And considering how little it cost them to realise something as gallantly impressive as Flow, who knows what they might be capable of with a greater production budget for an animated project. AOD endorses Flow. If you need to sit down with some animated movie for your kids, you'll be really very happy that it is Flow, rather than whatever garbage Disney is unleashing upon them now. The Disney films when I was growing up weren't so hot either. We got Home on the Range, Jungle Book 2, and Chicken Little. Though I have rather fond memories of Lilo and Stitch, I won't lie. Not that I'm too interested in seeing that being done as a live-action feature instead. Or the DreamWorks typical garbage. Speaking of live-action remakes, I remember watching the first two How to Train Your Dragons. They were okay, but a bit cutesy and sentimental. Very slick animation and understanding of motion, of course. Or whatever the hell nonsense they like from the many streaming services. Hey, you can do worse than stuff like Bluey, by the way. As an Australian, the rest of the world ought to be thanking us for entertaining their kids for so many hours. At least a basket of fruits or some flowers will do. Like, you still haven't, the rest of the world still hasn't repaid us for the Wiggles, by the way. Just so we're clear. Yeah, basket of fruits, some flowers, but preferably, might be a tall order, but preferably just exempt us from when the Western world decides to deploy troops to upend some third world country again. We did Vietnam, we did the War on Terror. Actually, we were the only other ones to help America in Vietnam, you ungrateful cunts. You know, we did the War on Terror, we believed your fucking lies, leave us out of the Mideast going forth, we want nothing to do with Taiwan, and we're certainly not going to help you engage Russia, who you deliberately provoked anyway at the sacrifice of Ukraine to drain the Russian military. But whatever, that's besides the point. Actually, speaking of China, considering the US support of rank genocide over on the Gaza Strip, is there any reason why we ought to feel more morally righteous for trading with the US as opposed to China? I'm not sure that there still is one. We used to bring up the whole Uyghur attempted genocide in regards as to why we wouldn't, make nice with China. But given the American actions of the last 2 years, what America has enabled, supported, and the people have tried to shut down for calling this out, people whose lives they've tried to ruin, why should we feel morally bankrupt for wanting to build closer ties with China instead? I sincerely used to be of a mind that, of course, the US is the lesser of two evils compared to China, but, I'm not as convinced anymore. I'd sooner put them on par. Yeah, why not? Anyway, I'm not sure that there still is a good reason, without downplaying the crimes of the ruthless Chinese state. they begin to seem like a lesser evil as time tragically passes and passes. Anyway, we're on board with Flo, a cat, a capybara, a lemur, and a golden retriever, a boat caught in a tree, like in Aguirre, the Wrath of God. I really hope they were homaging that, but they presumably were not. And the most wholesome, beneficial, artistically serious animated film that you can show your kids to be released via the Western world in maybe an entire decade or longer. Thank you and good night. I felt Flo quite thoroughly lived up to its enthused, rather worthy hype.